Thanks so much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here. Be back at the faculty in the facilities where I wrote my PhD a few years back. And so welcome to this lecture of systems theory, or I prefer to call it more casually systems thinking. And I will talk about systems thinking's impact on how we talk about law and regulation to enhance sustainability in business. And then, and there's some I can just say for the audience participating online is that we have a minor hiccup in terms of the technology, but I think we use double computers, and then we're gonna be all fine, I hope. And in any case, this is the content of this lecture. I will start with setting the scene with the sustainability challenge, and I'm quite sure that most of you perfectly well know a lot about the components of the sustainability challenge, but this is important for the logic and the narrative of the lecture. So I briefly touch upon some major concepts in sustainability science and go in depth when it comes to these two concepts: global interconnectivity, and then I discuss some contemporary business practices issues. And in terms of systems thinking, I take you through how I've been defining systems, some history on systems theory, and especially social ecological systems thinking. And then I address how systems thinking can be used in legal research, and when coming from a legal perspective on when doing the analysis. And I briefly discuss some specific concepts and approaches in that field on system thinking and the law, and also some implications or some learnings from recent projects. Yes. So the sustainability challenge. I said that I'm gonna start briefly with this topic. So I'm gonna start with the planetary boundaries framework that I can imagine a majority of you already know a lot about. But since we are witnessing a sustainability crisis at a planetary level, this framework has been very, very important in recent years to understand what is at stake, and the fact that the most pressing and unprecedented consequences of use of natural resources has sort of ended us up being in this very worrying state, which affects the future of humanity at the planet. And this framework, as you see, consists of 9 different boundaries. And at the moment, this is an old image of the framework. Some of you may know that recent research has shown that actually 6 out of 9 planetary boundaries have now been transgressed. Very serious, and it creates a lot of uncertainty for the future. And this really increases the risk of irreversible environmental change at the global scale. But as an entry point for analyzing sustainability, planetary boundaries is not enough. This was the environmental side of the crisis, let's say. And some of you may also be familiar with the donut or the social foundation, because of course, sustainability also comprise social aspects, and this is what this figure could be summarized as a figure that describes the minimal level of human well-being, or the social foundation. And it's I haven't included any references here, but yeah, this is from Kate Raworth's work a few years ago already, I should say. But what I want you to take with you from sort of this sort of integrated conceptual figure of these two planetary boundaries and social foundation is that it is an interconnected and interrelated conceptual figure that describes the sustainability crisis that we are in the middle of. Yes. But what I want to talk about more specifically is, of course, aspects of this sustainability crisis that is directly related to and important for systems thinking. And we see that today's world is more connected than ever. Everything is connected with everything else. And here I use the term interconnectivity because this is what the sustainability challenges is characterized by, global interconnectivity. And in order to understand that concept, you also need to understand complexity. And I will also share the notes to this presentation, because I've chosen some figures of this presentation is with not so much text, so it's hard to look back on the presentation only, but I will also provide some my notes and reflections on these slides as well. But anyway, so to understand complexity of business and its impact on society, and thereby how to regulate business, a recognition of interconnectedness and interdependency between business and the rest of the world is important. And here's complexity science comes handy. And in my work, I've been using the definition by Praser et al. From 2018. But I mean, there's a lot in this field of research. But in any case, I define complex systems as open, nonlinear system with interconnecting and interacting elements. So again, I will provide my notes on this. But the nature of complex problem is that traditional solutions where decision-making makers seek control often leads to new problems. So paradoxically, our ability to make sense of and steer societies and our environment have diminished with the amount of different tools that have been developed. And this is because complexity is not what is complicated. So it's actually the opposite of classical analytical thinking. So it's important to make a distinction between complex and complicated phenomenon. And one of the most significant benefits with using a complex system lens is that it allows us to study governance systems at an aggregated level. This is not always the case in legal studies, but increasingly so. I mean, myself did my PhD on multiple fields within EU law, very much an aggregated analysis of multiple components within the field. So it can be very, very useful depending on the research question, of course. So when studying governance system at an aggregated level, you need to then understand this as an aggregation of regulations, institutions, rules, actors, norms, and decision-making procedures in various combinations. And our mental models and causal beliefs are being seriously challenged by this way of thinking about governance and the law. But it is necessary, because again, thinking back on the pace of and the scale of global change that we are seeing now, as I showed in the beginning with the transgress planetary boundaries, etc. Okay, so COVID-19 is not as sort of relevant anymore. We have other problems as wars in different regions. We have recession, etc. But I want to include this example still, because of course we still have COVID lurking around in our society, and because it is also a clear example of the complexity that this current state of the environment shows us, and what it does to society, but also this has an impact on business. There's been some work on a different kind of animal influences and zoonosis for a while, and in this sustainability science domain. As you know, it's these different kinds of diseases comes due to not only increased trade and travel, but also land use change, climate change, and rapid urbanization. So factors that are all directed indirectly or directly to business practices. Okay, so I go also now over to more business-related sort of aspects relevant for systems thinking, because in a complex world, companies, as a dominant legal form for doing business, play an important role. And they are creatures of law for their and they rely on law for their existence as directly accessible for regulation. Company law provides a regulatory infrastructure for companies with significance for the perception of the purpose of the companies and the duties of their decision makers. So, as you know, contemporary business practices are itself, they are themselves deep, characterized by deep complexity and opacity, through organization control and governance decoupling, through organization, through financial engineering and increased digitalization. So, and this has, of course, impact how it's possible to regulate business, and in some cases it's not possible, and how to identify who or what is in control of different economic enterprises is increasingly difficult. And this fragmentation between different entities in a corporate group can be really hard to trace. So this is also an example where systems thinking can really help. And I think that one of the most useful way of thinking about how systems thinking can help business research is to think about global value chains. Because, as you know, there's been a lot of different efforts made to help improve business practices that really has consequences across the whole value chains of global companies. But as you also are familiar with, there's still to date there's still a lot of different issues at the moment. So examples are corporate activities that violate the rights of workers, consumers, and there's also very well-known example of illicit financial flows and tax evasion and corruption. So this is, at least from my perspective, one of the most useful concept where you can really envisage how systems thinking can help in thinking about sustainability and business. And now I come to the core of this. It's been a long introduction, but it is this is a lecture in sustainability law, so I think that it's important. this is not the founder of systems theory, but it is someone that I imagine is a Norwegian man reconnecting to nature up in the mountains. And I found it a bit suitable for this context, since we're in Norway talking about sustainability law. But it was a man, a biologist, who is who is deemed as the founder of systems theory. He has, for a Swede like me, not a very easy name, but Ludwig von Bertalanffy is how I can pronounce his name. And he developed this work already in the 1940s. So that's a key take-home message from my lecture. But again, before talking a bit more about the theory, I want to just establish what I mean with system. And for those of you who have reading a lot on different literature on sustainability and systems thinking since prior to this lecture, are perhaps familiar with Donella Meadows. And in my work, I've been using her definition of systems. So systems as a set of elements or parts that is coherently organized and interconnected in patterns or structures that produces a characteristic set of behaviors, often classified as its function or purpose. So also what's important is that in her work, she talked about systems that are more than the sum of its parts and exhibit adaptive, dynamic, goal-seeking, self-preserving, and sometimes evolutionary behavior. And I think that's also very useful to think about how systems can help us understand phenomena in the world. So some glimpses from systems theory. Like I said in the start of the lecture, I will focus mainly on social ecological systems, but I want to just take you through some additional background of this lens and this theory, because even though it was this biologist Ludwig who developed the theory in the 1940s, other fields, other disciplines have been using systems theory in multiple way, I should say. But in terms of how the systems theory that I've been using, it's important to take note of what Ross Ashby did, because he further developed the theory through his work on cybernetics. And cybernetics can be defined as a science of control and communication in the animal or in the machine. And this research area focuses on circular feedback mechanisms in the organization, communication and control of complex systems, or in a phrase, the art of steersmanship. But again, many other disciplines have made use of systems thinking in organizational studies. System theory can even be traced back before the 1940s, in the 1930s. In the 2000s, other authors have also been further developing system theory in organizational studies, focusing on rational, natural, open systems in organizations, trying to understand nonlinear aspects of organizational operations, basically. And systems approaches have also been used in behavioral theory of the firm and sense making, and as such, been used to capture organizational and social complexity. But let's go to the main theme for me, social ecological systems thinking. The complex sustainability challenge that I presented earlier requires a systems perspective in which both social and ecological aspects are taken into account. Social ecological systems thinking underlines the science behind the identified thresholds in the planetary boundaries framework, and is nowadays considered key for solving the sustainability challenge. But before further discussing what social ecological system thinking is, another concept, I introduce another concept here because it's also nowadays is fundamentally important for understand social ecological systems, and that is the new epoch Anthropocene that scientists for a while now have been sort of establishing that we are living in a new geological epoch called the Anthropocene. And what does that mean? It means, just as you see in this image, that humans are controlling everything. And with that, I mean, there is global overwhelming evidence that humans impact atmospheric, geologic, hydrologic, biospheric Earth system processes. So it's an important concept for understanding social ecological systems thinking work, and how this can be further integrated into the understanding how business practices impact the world. Yes, so this is a bit quite an old image of social ecological systems thinking, but I think it's important to show it. In one way, it can, when you hear social ecological system thinking, you may think that you overcomplicate something that we actually can really understand, that humans depend on nature. But especially both in theory and in practice, this actually is not the case, because this is not how we today we live our lives, as this is not true, basically. So important for this lecture is, again, that humans are dependent on nature, and this goes also for business practices, also dependent on nature. And I also want to emphasize that social ecological system thinking is also well positioned to act as a bridging concept in different scientific disciplines, but also between researchers and practitioners. I have some experience of that myself, and the reason is that this approach can be used to opening up discussion for joint creative work, defining a problem, and select appropriate variables for examinations. And I also want to make sure that this is clear, that this is not often used in legal research to date, because despite the convincing benefits of using this approach when analyzing sustainability challenges, it's not yet fully integrated in legal research, and not so much either in other business-related fields as well. So, but there's so in some there's more work that needs to be done in this area. So, systems thinking and the law. I try to think about this as something where we turn lawmaking that is fit for purpose, and because law is to date is unable to respond to regulatory challenges that arise from complex Earth system challenges in the Anthropocene. And I will present now some concept that might be interesting for you to further look into, but I want to make clear that this is not an exhaustive list, and there's no like need to make use of these concepts. But one concept that can be useful is the one of thinking about polycentricity. And because polycentric governance has potential to capture multi-level collective action problems in relation to governance in a good way, it's here also just a description of different degrees of polycentricity. And I'm gonna use the definition of Ahlström here as polycentric systems as the ones that have many centers of decision making that are formally independent of each other. So this is just to describe it a bit more, to think about a lot of different informal actors that actually are also parts of governing systems. And this is, of course, when you think back about systems thinking, it means that you need to take into account all factors that are relevant, and that might not be only the ones that are that you think of in the first place. I also briefly go into the concept of institutional fit, which is the overarching conceptual framing that brings together governance, law, and sustainability problems, and is can be defined as the alignment of institutions with characteristics of the biophysical system that is being managed. And you see here now that you really try to think about different governance actions that govern some specific aspects in a system. So this is what I try to describe in this quite old-fashioned image. And this is, by the way, also a case from ocean acidification. I'm not going to go into the details of this work, but I will also provide some details from this work in my lecture notes. I also would like to bring to you the concept or the research field of Earth system law. Because in this context where there's institutional misfit, I would say, this new juridical concept has a lot of potential, and also it is responsive to the Anthropocene's normative, ethical, and regulatory challenges. And what's important here is that this field of work is really critically looking at the role of law in whether it can direct and optimize organized human responses to these challenges in the Earth system. So really interdisciplinary work, and I can also direct you to additional work except for the ones that I included here in the slide, if you're interested. And I'm gonna then continue to my final section of this presentation, and that is systems thinking in future practice. I would like to introduce a project that we worked on here in Oslo for quite some years, and it was already finished 3 years ago, but it was led by Professor Beate Sjåfjell, and other participants that had key roles in this project are in this room. So Yuka Manan was the risk manager, and you led the work with developing reform proposals on finance, and Eleanor, you led the work on developing reform proposals on products with a special emphasis on circular economy. But you did a lot more than that, but I just give you a flavor of what you did. But the aim of the project, which is important in the context of this lecture, is so the aim of the project was that he wanted to identify the barriers and drivers for market actors' contribution to the UN Sustainable Development Goals within planetary boundaries to achieve policy coherence for development. And so the approach we did use, not in all the work that was done, because we were around 70 researchers around the globe, so we were quite a few, but we used systems thinking, and it played a key role for the project. And since it was interdisciplinary, it was very useful to have a approach that could be used as a bridging concept that we all came together and used and understood. And here it was the concept of the regulatory ecology, which was a tool to facilitate an understanding of the regulatory elements that influence or constrain the market actors in the systems. yeah, I'm not going to go into the more details about the project, but perhaps you already mentioned it. Also very happy to direct you to some materials from this project. It's all open access, or what, almost the majority at least. I just wanted to show that there is some work in this space directly relevant for business research. So I conclude. No. If an approach could be used to understand the problem, why shouldn't you use it? Systems thinking is really one of those sort of tools in the toolbox that can be used to solve a lot of different problems, in my opinion. Because you see the relationship between structure and behavior, and enables a process that will lead to understand how systems work. And in an increasingly complex world, systems thinking is an approach that can enable managing, adapting, and seeing a wide range of choices that are presented to society. And the approach simplifies the identification of root causes of problems and enables the identification of new opportunities. So there's some, for sure, wide range of benefits with using this approach. But of course, I want to bring with you that there's some, it cannot solve everything, of course, especially important loopholes, let's say, in the application of the theory is in regards ethical trade-offs. And I can also direct you to some literature in that space as well, because it's quite important, especially for if you're doing legal research. This is a very natural science-oriented way of thinking about the world. So, but thank you for listening to this lecture. I welcome any question that you may have.
Thank you, Hanna.
Thank you. And now I stop recording.